Okay, let's begin by bringing up the Photoshop browser so we can have a look at the images we're going to work with. I'm just going to go ahead and hit Shift-Control-O or Shift-Command-O on the Mac and bring up my file browser, and on my desktop I have a folder that I've copied across, which is the project files for the Photoshop lesson that we're working on. So go ahead and open that and we'll see all of the images that we have in that folder. Now what we're going to do is just scroll down the list here. We can see each of these individual files we'll play with throughout the course of the training. We're going to focus on this image to start with, skyscrapers.jpg. I want you to double click to open that one. We can see it's a standard image of some skyscrapers looking up into the sky. And this is a perfect example to use when doing perspective and depth of field because we have a lot of height inside this image. Now, as well as using this, we're also going to be using the starfish image. We'll pull that one up in just a second. First thing I want to do to this is to try and blur out some of the central part of this image, as if the camera's f-stop was set pretty small and the vertical height of the shot was a lot more blurred out in the distance. So what I'm going to do is a very simple blurring technique through a selected area. Now, before I do that, just press Ctrl-R or Command-R to bring up the rulers, and we can see the rulers around the outside of the image. And then what I'll also do is hit the F key just once on the keyboard to fit the image in the center. Now this is very handy because it obviously removes all of the junk around the outside that can clutter up the area we're working on. With Photoshop CS, we can always hold down the space bar and scroll around and not be defined by any boundaries that the image has to sit into. We can literally move it anywhere around on screen. So this gives us a lot of room to play with. Now what I'm going to do is through the rulers, I'm just going to come up to the top ruler bar here and drag a guide down. And as I drag towards the center of the screen, you will notice that it just snaps into place. It gives us the dead vertical center of our file. And then on the left-hand side, if I just pull the tools palette out of the way, I'm going to do the same and drag a vertical guide out and also snap that into the center. Now, the reason I've done this is so we can draw a marquee that's perfectly centered on the frame. Now, back in the tools palette, we have our standard marquee tools, which are defined up here in the upper left-hand side, rectangular and elliptical. I'm going to go ahead and choose the elliptical marquee tool for just a second. I'm going to place my cursor in the center of the screen, then hold down the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and just click and drag and start drawing yourself a shape. Now it's up to you how far you want to drag this and define how much area is going to be blurred out. But one of the techniques we're going to use here is to soften the edge of this marquee once we've created it. So we don't want to make it too big, otherwise the feather will add to that and add too much distortion to the image. So I'm going to make it maybe half the size of the image, so roughly the same distance between the guide center and the marquee that there is on the outside of the image back to the marquee itself. Now once you've drawn that, come up to the select menu at the top of the screen, go down and choose feather. Now this will allow us to apply a soft edge to this selection. I've got my default set at around 30. That's probably okay. Maybe I'll just push that up to about 40 pixels. Let's go ahead and give that a try and click OK. And what will happen is you won't notice any visual difference here with the shape of the marquee itself, maybe a slight movement, but what's actually happened now is any filter that we apply through this selection is going to have its edges or the amount of the effect blended out back into the original image because we now have a soft edge selection. So obviously we're going to use a blur here. So let's come up to the filter menu, come down to the blur submenu, come over here and choose a good old-fashioned Gaussian blur. Now, the reason I like to use this filter is it does bring up a dialog box giving us the amount of blur that we are applying to this part of the image, so you're getting an exact idea of how it's going to look. And obviously we can see a preview here inside the marquee itself. Now, just so we can see the two together, I can always pull the dialog box into view here. And don't forget, use that space bar and drag the image out on the left-hand side. Again, a wonderful feature of Photoshop CS. Now, 5 pixels at this point is not really enough, so I'm just going to gently drag that up, maybe about 8 or 9 pixels. But you can see that the feathered edge here obviously shows up that it maybe isn't enough. So if you find that 40 pixels was not to your liking, just go ahead and cancel it out, undo the feather, and apply a new one. I'm going to keep it about 40 and just bring it down to maybe around 6 pixels. Go ahead and click OK. Now once that's done, obviously I'll press Ctrl-D or Command-D on the Mac to deselect, and you'll see what we've done now is applied a very gentle feather to the upper part of these buildings just to give it a little bit of camera focus. A very simple technique, all done through a soft edge mask.